Let's have a look at how to form the comparative and superlative forms of adjectives in German. You probably aren't aware that these are what they're called in English, but I will go through some English examples as we go as well. First of all, what are the comparative and the superlative? As I say, you've used them a lot in English by now, but you're probably not aware that this is what they're actually called, these forms. If you look at the word comparative, you can see the word compare in it. So when we use the comparative form of an adjective, we're using an adjective to compare two or more things. The superlative, if you think about a supernova, a superhero, you're thinking about the best of the best, the top level of something. So you're saying it's the most of that adjective. Let's have a look at how we form them in English. Now, in English, if we have a single syllable, we can simply add an ER and an EST. So the comparative is bigger and the superlative is the biggest. You'll notice here that we've had to double a G. So we have some rules in English that you probably don't even realize we have as well. If we've got a single syllable with a short vowel, we generally will double our consonant at the end of the word before adding the ER or the EST. Have a look at loud. Again, we've got a single syllable in English, but we have a longer vowel sound here. So with it, we can simply add ER and EST. So our comparative is louder, superlative loudest. When we have in English more than one syllable in our adjective, we can't simply add ER. We have to use extra words to do this. In the comparative, we add the word more. And in the superlative, we say most. This is for adjectives that have more than one syllable, unless they end in an E sound, like funny. We can say funnier. But if they are more than one syllable and don't end in that E sound, like beautiful, we can't say beautifuler and beautifulest. It just doesn't work in English. Let's have a look at how we do it in German, and it's a little bit more straightforward, believe it or not. For most adjectives in German, you simply add the ER and an STE for the superlative. So for lustig, funny, we say lustiger for funnier, and lustiger or am lustigsten for our superlative. Now the reason we have two is that, as you know, German adjectives need an adjective ending depending on where they are used in a sentence. So if our adjective is used before the noun it's describing, so the funniest teacher at school is not Mrs. Rosenzweig, then we would have this lustigste. But if you wanted to say Mrs. Rosenzweig is not the funniest teacher, then we would say she is not am lustigsten, ist nicht am lustigsten. So when you're learning the superlative in German, most of the time you'll use the just at this stage, but things like you have used this before when you've said my best friend and things like that. Now, if your adjective in German is a single syllable that has an A, O, or U in it, you're going to need to add umlauts. And that's relatively straightforward. You're used to adding umlauts over those vowels. So our example here is warm. We have to add umlauts to the A because warm is a single syllable, and then we add our ER, wärmer. And in the superlative, we keep that going. We have wärmste and am wärmsten. Now, if your adjective ends in a T, a D, a double S, or an EU, like neu, we actually have to not only add the umlaut if it's a single syllable in the comparative, but we actually have to add an E in the middle. This E here in the superlative with kälteste, you're going to have to add it simply so you can pronounce the word anyway. So you're not going to have problems remembering that because you can't say kälteste without moving your mouth to get that in there. It just doesn't work. It's hard to say without it. So you'll get used to saying it because it feels like that's what's needed in there. Now let's have a look. There are a couple of exceptions to these rules, but what you probably don't realize is that we actually have them in English as well. And you say, no, we don't have exceptions in English. You know very well by now that English does have exceptions. Think about the word good. Do we say that was gooder, or I'm gooder than you, and that she's the goodest? Now, little kids may say it, but it is an exception. We don't follow this ER, EST. We also don't say the most good. Okay? Or more good. In English, we say good, better, best. Also have a think about like. So we would not say the one I like her. We say the one I like more or prefer, and my favorite, or the one I like most. So we do have these exceptions in English. Now, you know by now that German and English are related quite heavily in many areas. So this is going to help remembering our exceptions in German easier. And they actually sound very similar to the English ones as well, in one case in particular. So let's have a look at gut. We don't say guter and gutesten. We say gut, besser, am besten, or beste. And you can see there that is very similar to that English pattern that we have. German and English are related, so these sort of common things do come up. With our like, that is another one of them. You know that gern is used to say you like doing something, and these two comparative and superlatives will be familiar to you because of when you've talked about your favorite things. Lieber means to prefer. So I might say, ich schreibe gern auf Deutsch. I like writing in German. Ich schreibe lieber auf English. I prefer writing in English. And ich schreibe am liebsten, the most, I like writing the most, auf Japanisch, which of course would make no sense for me at the moment. So we have two that are the same, and you're not unfamiliar with either of them because of the common with good, better, best, and because you're used to this word Liebe, Liebsten, Lieblings from favorites. The other exception in German is to do with the word hoch, which means high or tall in terms of a building. And in the comparative, we do follow the rule about adding the umlaut to the O, but we also drop that C and we get höher. And then in the superlative, we throw the C back in, höchste and am höchsten. So just remember that the comparative form of hoch is höher. So that is one of the exceptions. Okay, let's have a look at a few examples here. My room is bigger than my sister's room, but my brother's room is the biggest. And that, mein Zimmer ist größer, is our comparative als das Zimmer von meiner Schwester, aber das Zimmer von meinem Bruder ist am größten, the superlative. Hotel Adlon Kempinski is the most expensive. So you can see there in English we have to say this most expensive to form the superlative here. In German, because we've got this immediately before the thing it's describing, we are not going to use the So we're going to say Hotel Adlon Kempinski ist das teuerste Hotel. It's the most expensive hotel. So you can see there that instead of saying ist am teuersten, because the hotel word comes after it, I've simply used it without the Okay, das teuerste Hotel. The das is normal for hotel, and I've added my normal adjective ending to teuerste. And the third one, I find football more interesting than shopping, but a concert would be the best. So just like in English, we don't necessarily follow the same adjective the whole way through the sentence. In German, you can combine them as well. And we end up with, ich finde Fußball interessanter, that's my comparative here, als einkaufen, aber ein Konzert wäre am besten, would be the best. So just think through those rules again for forming the comparative and the superlative. In summary, most German adjectives add an ER to form the comparative, and STE or and sten to form the superlative. If the adjective is one syllable with an A, O, or U, you need to add umlauts for both comparative and superlative. If the adjective ends in T, D, SS, or EU, except for groß, which simply goes größer and am größten, the others will need to add an E before your STE for that superlative. And you need to add normal adjective endings to the end of them when they come before the noun they describe. And remember, there are those 3 exceptions: gut, gern, and hoch. If the adjective is after the noun, the superlative form needs that So something ist am besten, but mein bester, something else. So have a go at exercise F on page 3 in your Cuts and Sprung 3 workbook and fill in the exercises, the answers to the sheet that you've been given for homework. If you've got questions, please write them down and bring them to class with you next lesson.